Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Henry.
Many moving parts. I'm Dr. Henry Segrishi, and it's my pleasure to serve as Director of Music here at Cedar Lane Unitarian Universalist Church. My pronouns are he and him.
And I am Fran Flieger. My pronouns are she and her, and I am today's worship associate. So on behalf of the entire congregation, we welcome you to our service this morning.
Our words of welcome are filled with our deepest aspirations and call us all to embody beloved community as we say responsively, you are welcome here. Whether you are joining us for the first time or you've been a member since our founding in 1951, you are welcome here. Whoever you are and whomever you love, you are welcome here. Whatever your gender identity and expression, beliefs, or immigration status, you are welcome here. However you arrived at this beloved place, in person or online, you are welcome here.
If you're joining us for the first time today, please raise your hand if you're comfortable doing that, and one of our greeters will come along and give you a little welcome gift. And in that gift is a little brochure that talks about Cedar Lane and gives you a place for you to share your info with us if you so choose. So at this moment, let's offer our guests and each other a warm Cedar Lane welcome.
I'd like to draw your attention to the announcements page that provides a wonderful snapshot of the many ways love works at Cedar Lane. In particular, we would like to invite you to join with Reverend Abi and our intern minister Dana Edwards as they host a fabulous cast of musicians and dancers sharing what Reverend Abi has titled Building the Beloved Community and Interfaith Martin Luther King Jr. Day Service. That's right here in the sanctuary this afternoon, 3 p.m. I can tell you that the wonderful Suitland High School Gospel Choir, of which Jasmine often accompanies and of which our alto soloist Rachel Moore is an alumnus, will be part of that service. So you'd like to come by and see that. And of special interest to me, probably the reason I'm standing here this morning to talk, is the 10th anniversary of our benefit concert, occurring here next Saturday evening, January 25th at 7:30 p.m. Admission is free. All donations at the door will go to support the good work of AIM, Action in Montgomery. And speaking of action, it will be the indomitable Dr. Jasmine Lee at the piano performing George Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue, surrounded by a fantastic jazz band performing the original rendition made famous by the Paul Whiteman Band in 1924. So we're not messing around here. We'll also be featuring our fabulous choir in selections from Aaron Copland's Old American Songs and a few of their favorite anthems, some of which you will hear this morning. So, we're still a little thin this morning, better than the first service, but you got a big load to carry here. You need to go out and spread the word. Take the flyers, give them to everybody you know, tell your family, tell your friends, tell them to bring their wallets, credit cards, and text so that we can make a lot of money, like $8,000 for AIM. That would be wonderful. So let's fill this place. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Henry. If you've been attending for a while and you're interested in becoming a member of Cedar Lane, please connect with Reverend Katie after the service.
Our pastoral visitor today is Mr. Phil Smith, and he will be available during and after the service to support you if you have a joy or sorrow in and on your heart.
So, let us turn now and greet our neighbors, especially the new folks.
the poor will inherit the earth.
The poor have inherent worth.
The poor will inherit the earth.
The poor have inherent worth.
I call this poverty a government handout when crumbs from the table of so-called joy fall, get stuck on the way down in the mouths of the
Praying. The bottoms eat us alive. Laces tied up, but we running out of time. We trying to survive. But people in charge ain't got no souls. No good ground to walk.
Tell me, when do good intentions do us enough harm? Our stomachs are empty like misleading headlines that make the world more black and white. Listen, will the poor be believed one day?
This month, it's a choice between the lights and the water. Next month might be between going to work or going to school.
And ain't nobody tell me that in college, 'cause it come from this lens of rich. Got a hole in beneath this well of resources, got a system that was set up to fail every time, but hey, there will always be a job.
Just gotta work my body into the emergency room. Gotta drag my sack of bones to the doctor's office if I can afford to be healthy. If Obama gave us Romney care,
What can trump that? Don't nobody want a single pay. Government don't want to give nothing away. And anyone can get a .45 locked and loaded, put in the hands that fire off rounds like the bowels of hell into crowds.
we got money for that though. Largest military force in the world though.
Biggest portion of government spending, though.
People always been property over here, yo.
From the Atlantic to prison to war, poverty to the bottom, can't be free.
Can't buy food to eat. Bernie Mac won't buy us lunch, but expect
us
us to pay his way.
Wall Street, just fine.
But we die. We get charged up with crimes. When we fall victim to our neighbor, it's called the other side of the train tracks.
Black on black crime.
War on drugs, senseless violence. Money has never been innocent.
The poor are left defenseless.
The first capitalists invented this problem, and now all of us have to solve this.
Research your constitution.
Revise your moral constitution. Poor People's Campaign, bringing forth the revolution. Come and let us worship.
Please rise in body or spirit as we sing together. Somebody's hurting my brother.
Well, somebody's hurting my brother, and it's gone on
Far too long,
Well, it's gone on
far too long.
Yeah, it's gone on far too long. Well, somebody's hurting my brother, and it's gone on far too long. And we won't be silent anymore. Well, somebody's hurt my sister, and it's gone on far too long. Oh, it's gone on far too long.
Beautiful. As Kathy Bryant and Peggy Jackson kindle the chalice, the symbol of our faith and our gathered community, please rise in body and or in spirit to share in unison the chalice lighting words on the screen. Blessed is the fire that burns deep in the soul. It is the flame of the human spirit touched into being by the mystery of life. It is the fire of reason, the fire of compassion, the fire of community, the fire of justice, the fire of faith. It is the fire of love burning deep in the human heart, the divine glow in every life.
You may be seated. One spring morning on the way to school, Wanda noticed a bush growing in the empty quarter lot at Fillmore and Hudson Streets.
It must have been growing for a while because it was about 2 feet tall. Wanda was surprised that she hadn't noticed it before.
But there it was, bare and thorny, and Wanda, who loved beautiful things, felt her heart beat faster.
Wanda decided to take care for this bush and make it her own. All during school, she thought about her rose bush. During art class, what did she drew? She drew pictures of what it would look like in bloom.
During library, she borrowed books on arranging flowers. During science, she asked many questions about how to take care of it, even though the lesson was on electricity.
After school, she rushed to the rose bush. It was still bare and thorny. Maybe it needs some more sun, thought Wanda. She put down her bag, began dragging some of the nearby trash out to the curb. Mrs. Turner stopped to help her with a broken chair. Wanda showed Mrs. Turner the rose bush.
Oh, Wanda, I'm not so sure that's a rose bush, Mrs. Turner said gently.
Sure it is, said Wanda. You just wait. In a few weeks, this lot will be full of roses.
Mrs. Turner wished Wanda good luck, but as she walked away, she thought to herself,
If that's a rose bush, I'm the Queen of England.
The next day after school, Wanda hurried to her rose bush. It was still bare and thorny. Maybe it needed some air, thought Wanda. She put down her bag and began taking more of the trash out to the curb.
Mr. Claudel, on his way home from work, stopped to help Wanda with an old door. Wanda showed him the rose bush. Mr. Claudel said, I don't know much about gardening, Wanda, but I don't think that's a rose bush.
Sure it is, said Wanda. In a few weeks, this lot will be filled with the sweetest smelling roses. She went off to drag away some more trash.
Mr. Claudel shook his head. If that's a rose bush, he said to himself, then I'm the King of France.
Every day after school that week and the next, Wanda worked in the empty lot. Mrs. Giamoni, who lived in an apartment next door, gave Wanda trash bags for the old shoes, beer bottles, broken toys, and bits of glass that she was picking up.
Wanda thanked her and said, I've got to get rid of all this trash so my rose bush will get enough snow and fresh air to bloom.
Wanda showed Mrs. Giamoni her rose bush. Mrs. Giamoni tried to tell Wanda that it was not a rose bush.
Oh, but it is. And in a few weeks, this lot will be filled with the most beautiful roses you ever saw.
The next week, when the bush still wasn't blooming, Wanda talked to Mrs. Jones, her school librarian. Does it have enough water? Miss Jones asked.
Water, Wanda said. Of course. That will make it bloom. After school, Wanda ran to the butcher shop across the street to talk to Mr. Sanchez for some water for the rose bush.
Rose bush? Is that what I see you taking care of and talking to every day over there? Are you sure that's a rose bush, Wanda? Mr. Sanchez asked.
Oh, yes, I'm sure, Wanda said. But it can't bloom because it needs water. And you'll see, in a few weeks, that whole lot will be full of roses.
Mr. Sanchez gave her water in a plastic bucket. He muttered to himself, in a few weeks, that thorn bush will still be a thorn bush. Every day, Wanda ran to check on her rose bush after school. Mr. Claudel stopped to see if there were any roses on his way home from work.
Mrs. Turner, on her way to the butcher shop, stopped to see if there were any roses. Mrs. Giamoni called down from her apartment to ask if there were any roses. Mrs. Jones asked if there were any roses.
As he gave Wanda a bucket of water, Mr. Sanchez asked if there were any roses. To each person, Wanda would answer the same thing.
Just you wait. Pretty soon, this whole lot will be full with roses. Then one day in June, Wanda had an idea. She gave an invitation to Mrs. Turner, Mr. Claudel, Mrs. Giamoni, Ms. Jones, and Mr. Sanchez. What did it say? Please come for tea and muffins in Wanda's rose garden Saturday morning at 9. Each of them was concerned that Wanda had worked so hard and that she would be disappointed.
Saturday morning arrived. Everyone was surprised to see Wanda's rose bush covered with roses. Paper roses that Wanda had made herself and carefully tied to each bare thorny branch. But
more surprising yet,
everyone who came to the party had brought along a rose bush to plant near Wanda's, except Miss Jones, who brought delicious blueberry muffins.
After they had eaten their muffins and drunk their tea, they all got busy planting rose bushes. Mr. Claudel and Mrs. Turner dug the holes.
Mrs. Giamoni held the bushes in place while Wanda and Miss Jones filled in around the roots with soil.
And Mr. Sanchez brought water from his shop and watered them all thoroughly. When the work was finished, Mr. Claudel said, "Wanda, this is going to be a rose garden fit for a king."
Or a queen, said Miss Turner. Wanda and the others smiled.
And later that summer, the whole lot was filled with the biggest, most beautiful, sweetest smelling roses that anyone had ever seen, just as Wanda always said that it would.
The
Please.
end.
Please rise in body or spirit as we sing together, "There's a River." Perdona la tardanza en escribirte.
Pardon the lag in writing to you.
A nosotros nos dejaron pocas letras.
We were left with few letters.
En tu casa nos tocó ser tapetes,
In your home, we were cast as rugs,
a veces de pared, pero casi
sometimes on walls, though we
siempre estuvimos en el piso.
were almost always on floors.
También te servimos de mesa,
We served you as a table,
de lámpara, de espejo, de juguete.
a lamp, a mirror, a toy.
Si algo te causamos fue risa.
If anything, we made you laugh.
En tu cocina nos hiciste otro sartén.
In your kitchen, we became another pan.
Todavía, como sombra, nos usas.
Even now, as a shadow, you use us.
Nos temes, nos gritas, no odias.
You fear us. You yell at us. You hate us.
Nos tiras, nos lloras, nos niegas.
You shoot us. You mourn us. You deny us.
Y a pesar de todo nosotros,
And despite everything, we
seguimos siendo nosotros.
continue being us.
América entiende de una vez.
America, understand once and for all.
Somos las entrañas de tu cuerpo.
We are the insides of your body.
En la cara reflejamos tu futuro.
Our faces reflect your future.
Ubi caritas et amor, Deus ibi est, congregam in
We gather each week not for our needs alone, but to bear witness to our joys, our triumphs, our sorrows, and our disappointments. In this circle of care, we make space for life's complexities, the many experiences that both bless and break our hearts. We come together to serve as companions on this life's journey. So I invite you to settle into this moment together, to rest in your chairs, allowing your body to just be held by the chair. Maybe even with a breath, lifting your shoulders up on the inhale, and as you exhale, rolling them back, releasing any stress, tension, or worry that might be there from this past week, this past month, or even longer. And with our next breath, let us settle in more deeply still. As I read our litany, which will be, we hold you in our hearts, know that if your eyes are closed, merely join the litany as your heart calls you to. If you are living through the small and extraordinary milestones of life, let us breathe together. We hold you in our hearts. If parenting is your spiritual practice, we hold you in our hearts. If you are mourning a loss, if you live with or care for someone with grief or chronic pain, let us breathe together. We hold you in our hearts. If you have suffered abuse or injustice, if you are a survivor, let us breathe together because we hold you in our hearts. Within our Cedar Lane community, we have known much loss. As this new year has turned, we've lost Joanne Smith, Diane Tesh, Laura Mae Dillow, Beatrice Shriver. We hold all who love them and mourn them in our hearts. Let us breathe together. We hold you in our hearts. Our caring extends beyond Cedar Lane to all those whose lives are lost or impacted by calamities and violence in this world. All who are suffering, we hold you in our hearts. And now, as we enter a silence together, those who are grieving the loss or commemorating an anniversary of a loss are invited to rise in body or spirit, in mourning or in memory, as we hold the silence together. Spirit of life and love, bless the broken, open hearts. May a greater love fill those spaces, and may all hearts be renewed and restored. May it be so. Amen. You may be seated. I expected surrender would feel like floating, not realizing that I had forgotten what it felt like to float for the first time. I expected that this surrender would involve holy water dense with sacred salt that renders me weightless. I expected surrender to heal me, and then I remembered the realities of salt in my wounds and water's ability to find them. Both the old wounds yet unhealed and the tiny cuts earned on the way to surrender. The sacred salt water will hold me and heal me. It will sting and burn, but it will also soothe and expedite my healing in ways that I've never experienced before. I'm here now in a state of complete and total surrender, and I am reminded again of my inevitable resistance. Those words were from our former intern minister, Kristen Green. And they were meant to be read by Tim Atkins, our director of lifespan education today, who showed up ready to soldier on through the flu. But we blessed him and sent him home to get well. So Tim, we hold you in our hearts. And as we enter this time of giving, we do so with gratitude for all of us who show up time and again to give in many ways of our time and our talent and a treasure for something bigger than ourselves, a dream yet to be realized, a garden on fallow soil. Today's offering will now be gratefully received. Thank you.
In the words of Reverend Lynn Unger, through the work of our hands and the work of our lives, our love is made real. May we be grateful for all that we bring and share to make love real here at Cedar Lane.
Spirit of hope, help me. I can't seem to find my way back to your realm. I've been wandering in labyrinths, running into dead ends, facing down monsters, losing my way. Ariadne's thread only tangles my feet and leaves my fingers raw. Spirit of hope, ground me. I've lost my bearings on what's real, who I am, how I got here, why it matters. On reality, makes a poor compass. I remember to look up, lest I get caught off guard, but such preparation means little to a soul suffering vertigo. Spirit of hope, steady me. Maybe my only way forward is to stay still. Perhaps if I rest my bones exactly where I am, instead of scrabbling for purchase, searching for loopholes, willing myself on the dust will settle enough for a path to reappear. It needn't be tended and beautiful, just discernible. Spirit of hope, guide me. You dwell in the turnaround between the exhale and the inhale, a moment of trust that pulls me into the future. I've been looking for something more grand, more obvious, more compelling, not recognizing the promise in the flickering signs. My body already knows the way home.
Dreamers, dreaming
Thank you, choir, Jasmine and Henry. I love the story of Wanda's roses. That Wanda is a real possibility thinker. She could look at a garbage-filled lot with a dead thorn bush and see a thriving rose garden, even when all of the people around her, including authority figures, thought otherwise. Eleanor Roosevelt once said, "All the water in the world cannot drown you if it doesn't get inside you." And Wanda didn't let the seeds of doubt, the drops of water inside her. But it's really hard not to drown sometimes, not to let the truth of climate change, our crumbling democracy, or the oppressive weight of white supremacy culture get inside of us. Our country is divided in a way some of us have never seen in our lifetime. The division is in many of our families as well as our political system. White nationalists have a powerful platform for spreading hate in a way they haven't in decades. Fires are ravaging Australia, earthquakes devastating a barely recovering Puerto Rico. The barren, empty lot and thorn bush before us seems more like a no man's land in an unwinnable war. But we can be possibility thinkers. We can answer a call to a larger love, and we can endeavor to embody the beloved community. As we head into a day reserved for honoring the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., a man who, against incredible odds, created a movement of change in the United States, a man who embodied beloved community, I invite us to meditate on his bravery, fierce dedication, and spiritual grounding. According to Ira Peck, author of From the Life and Works of Martin Luther King Jr., there was a point early in his career where the threatening letters and calls became more than he could handle. He was ready to give up. All possibility thinkers experience moments of doubt like this. But I'm glad he didn't give up. Peck reports that the Reverend Dr. King began to pray. He told God he was at an end to his powers and that he couldn't face it alone. And that, Peck says, he says that an inner voice told King to stand up for the truth and that God would be at his side forever. When all seemed lost for King, he turned to God, the source of greater love, the same love he brought forth into the world. But where do Unitarian Universalists go to find love, hope, and peace when they're staring at that garbage-filled lot, dreaming of roses, and yet drowning in the world's despair? For some Unitarian Universalists, we do the same thing as the Reverend Dr. King. We turn to a holy, higher power some of us might call God or Goddess or Spirit, Spirit of life, Spirit of love, Spirit of hope, Allah, or something else. Some of us do this turning towards poetry. The poetry of Ashanti Spear calls us to a moral center. In Carta a America, Alarcón provides a challenge to the collective community that he names America. And some of us connect through prayer. Last year, Tim Atkins, our director of Lifespan Religious Education, led an entire service on lament. And I love a good lament because it's the kind of prayer where we get permission to rage at the holy, make an ask for hope, healing, or resolution, and rest in the knowing that a greater love will create healing, change in our lives. The prayer, like most prayer actually, is a tool that transforms the person praying. I like to think of prayer as a focus tool, helping me to turn inward and tuning me in to a higher order of thinking or being. In today's service, the Reverend Linda Susan Ulrich's intercessional prayer to the Spirit of Hope is one such conversation rich with truth-telling and honesty, spoken as a plea to something larger, for some kind of assistance. Her words moved from a please help me to a specific request for steadiness in the storm. Former Cedar Lane intern Kristen Green's prayer is one of surrender, one of acknowledging that surrender isn't always easy and could be as painful as salted wounds, but when surrendering to that sacred healing water, that something larger, completeness can be found in releasing resistance to the change that is seeking to emerge in our lives. Surrender can be a hard word to hear, especially for many Unitarian Universalists, so let me clarify a little. Surrender isn't apathy or retreat. It isn't casting aside reality, but it's a releasing of ego and an attachment to a specific, possibly instant result. It can lead to moments of peace that can help us to begin again in love with a new creative force alive in us. But prayer, in the traditional sense, isn't everyone's jam. Some of us turn to nature to find our center. Long walks, gardening, bird watching, sailing, stargazing, and other acts that remind us that we are indeed a part of something larger, and there is a peace, focus, and surrender in connecting to the interconnected web in that way. Still others of us turn to the power and the promise that rests in the human community, in the hope that we can draw out and draw from greater love from the others journeying with us, like Wanda does with the cast of characters from Wanda's Roses. Now, the truth is, most of us draw from several of these sources of renewal to stay afloat and continue this work of building a more just world. And yet sometimes it still isn't enough, especially if we or someone we love is a direct target of violence. And so we turn again to the blueprint for embodying beloved community, the Reverend Dr. King. In his writing on suffering and faith, he talked about how his personal trials taught him the value of what he calls unmerited suffering. He went on to say, as my suffering mounted, I soon realized that there were two ways to seek to transform the suffering, or to seek transformation from the suffering, to transform it into a creative force. This possibility thinker didn't let suffering harden his heart or turn him from the task. He leaned into it, surrendering to the greater process that was moving through him, seeking to emerge as something new. King continued by saying that he decided to follow the latter course, and that, I quote, recognizing the necessity for suffering, I tried to make it a virtue, if only to save myself from bitterness. I've attempted to see my personal ordeals as an opportunity to transform myself and heal the people involved in the tragic situation which we obtain. I've lived these last few years with a conviction that unearned suffering is redemptive. Can you imagine having your home bombed twice, numerous trips to jail after protesting peacefully, multiple attempts on your life and death threats, and rather than turning to hate, looking instead at suffering as creative fuel to bring about redemption for all? But suffering is different for each of us, and it is wrong to put the burden of transformation on the most marginalized. In her book, An Ethic of Risk, Dr. Sharon Welsh talks about cultured despair and explains the notion that when things get too hard or overwhelming, those with a level of privilege, and she specifically names the middle class, have the ability to retreat, become apathetic, to stop doing the work that they once dreamed of doing to make the world a better place. We, each of us, have varying amounts of privilege, and we must all use what we have in service of collective redemption. We must not let despair derail us. The world needs us to be possibility thinkers who answer the great call of love and seek to do the transformative work of living into beloved community in all that it requires of us. That moment when the Reverend Dr. King was on his knees praying to God for help was a moment of deep despair. But the holy, his still small voice, his higher order of thinking or being, the call of love, offered him words that he needed to transform his despair into creative energy. And each of us has a still small voice inside of us, a higher order of thinking or being, a call to a greater love. But the thing is, we must be still enough to listen. And we must be open to the potential of a barren, garbage-filled lot being something more. Beloved community is built between the exhale and the inhale. It is in each moment, each choice. Theologian Catherine Keller defines God, the still small voice, that higher order of thinking or being, as omnipotential. So for Keller, God isn't omnipotent, this creator outside of us, but a creative force of infinite potential in each moment, between the moments even, moving in, as, and through all things. Through daily engagement in spiritual practices, in acts of faith, hard work, and tenacious commitment to a vision of liberation and freedom for all, the Reverend Dr. King seemed to be able to tap into that omnipotential that is available for each of us. How will we answer that call? How might we be transformed by the suffering we see and feel? The Reverend Dr. King's work continues today with the Poor People's Campaign. Where society seeks to divide people on issues, the Poor People's Campaign proclaims that it strives to bring people of all colors and abilities to move to dismantle systemic racism, eliminate poverty, transform the war economy to a peace economy, and shift from ecological devastation to sustainability, while building unity across lines of division. We don't have to drown in despair or retreat from it. We don't need to become bitter if we are attacked, nor do we need to be martyrs. We can be transformed by suffering. We can grow a field of roses in the most barren and forgotten lots. Together, we can build the world that we dream about. But first, we must answer the call of love together. May it be so. Amen. I invite you to rise in body or spirit, bumping elbows or holding hands, as we join in these closing words by the Reverend Teresa Inés Soto. Where is life sending you? Here, now? Don't flinch. Where will you go? Across the street to learn the name of your neighbor, across the city to support interfaith dialogue, to witness the practice of neighbors whose faith has different names, uses different words than yours? Is life calling you to come closer to the grief around you, not with words, but with empathy and kind silence? Sometimes there's no fixing sadness, and we must instead weather it. But together, we make the journey much more possible than alone. Where does life send you? To coffee hour to start the brew, to accompany young students in experiencing everything that Unitarian Universalism can be for us, both as individuals and as people practicing together in community. Go where your heart pulls you. Catch up to that insistent call, to that thing that waits for you, the soft place where your talent can rest and your joy bubble up. The sound, the lights, the homeless shelter, the Poor People's Campaign, The tasks of governance practiced with care, as much as lighting any chalice, as crucial as singing any song. There is somewhere you can be. There might not be a parking space with a reserved sign you can see, but there is a yes for you from the universe. Whether your task is to work or to heal, to rest or to play, it is time to go where life sends you and be who you are meant to be. Go forth. Amen. I invite you to remain risen as we sing together hymn number 1014, Answering the Call of Love.
The promise of the Spirit, faith, hope, and love abide. And so every soul is blessed and made whole. The truth in our hearts is our guide. We are answering the call of love. Hands joined together as hearts beat as one. And moment by faith, we dare to proclaim, standing on the side of love. Sometimes we build a barrier to keep love tightly bound, corrupted by fear, unwilling to hear, deny